Hello everybody, my name is Jimmy Smith and welcome to another Wine with Jimmy session on WSET, Understanding Alsace for the WSET Level 3. This is a remarkably useful section that you'll find very in detail for what you need to do to prepare you for your WSET Level 3 examination. It has a lot of information around maps. We have a Google Earth video to watch as well. We talk about the geology, we talk about the topography and how that affects the style of wine. We've also at the end got a working written question that we'll work through together, and I'll give you the key answers to these so you can see how questions are formed in the WSET Level 3 and how to structure your answer. You'll see here that in this picture, this is the Grand Cru of Kitteley. Also coming around to a little bit of Searing in the southern part of Alsace and Gewurztraminer, which is where we find some amazing wines in this area. So you'll see this is the Vosges Mountains and there's the town of Gewurztraminer in the background. So rather splendid place. So as mentioned, my name is Jimmy Smith. So at the bottom, along the bottom of the screen, you'll see all of our social media handles. Mine for Twitter, Instagram and Facebook is @WineWithJimmy. And then there's @West London Wine and South London Wine, my two wine schools in London, United Kingdom. And then I've got Streatham Wine House, which is my wine bar in the United Kingdom as well. So please do get in touch if you have any comments or questions. We'd love to hear your thoughts and theories. You can comment in the YouTube box below this video or send us any of the comments and questions to the handles that are below on that screen. Great, so we're going to look first of all at Alsace in France. So on the left-hand map, you have, of course, the country of France, the glorious nation of France. We have in the top area, hold on, let me just get this rocking and rolling, here we go. We are looking at one of the most northerly areas of France, but firmly on the eastern border, where it borders Germany, and it's the River Rhine that actually delivers the natural border between France and Germany. So it is therefore part of it, the second most highest in latitude in France. So therefore you are looking at generally a cold climate. We will actually class Alsace as being a cold continental climate for the most part. As you get down towards the south, towards Mulhouse, you'll actually find that it gets a little bit more moderate, but mainly a cold continental climate in this zone. And those of you that have watched many of these videos before will see there is a recurring trend here with the pattern that comes across from the Gulf Stream. So the Gulf Stream here, which affects places like Bordeaux, comes across central France here, comes across the Loire Valley, hits a big mountain range in the central part of France, and this is the Massif Central range, which kind of comes down in this area. There's bits of hills here, not so much. So what you'll find is therefore the wind pattern that comes up here is pushed in other directions. And a lot of it goes up towards the Paris Basin, goes up towards Champagne region. Some of it comes up here in northern Burgundy as well, but it's pushed that way. Some of it will find its way towards Alsace. But of course, what Alsace has is another protective layer. And that protective layer is the Vosges Mountains. So the Vosges Mountains is what sits on the western side of Alsace, and I'll put it in here for you. So on this side of the map, we can, oh, I'm going to get rid of that one. Sorry, let's put it in line here. So it is this bit here. It kind of is quite there, a little bit of a depreciation as it comes up here. Okay, so most of the wine region of Alsace is heavily guarded and heavily protected from that westerly wind which originates from the Gulf. So this means that a lot of this hits this side, okay, but doesn't make it much further, and some of it will come across here. It's a little bit wetter up in this area, as there is a depreciation in the Vosges Mountains in that area. This means that Alsace is a remarkably dry area. In these vineyards that we are locating on the eastern side, the rainfalls are dramatically low. They sit on an average of around up to about 500 millimeters per year. Okay, I should actually write this in blue, to be honest, because water is blue. So let's do that to help you a little bit here. So about 500 millimeter per year of rainfall on this side. So it's really dry. And on the other side, where of course it does get an effect from the westerly wind, it can be up to about, what, 2,100 millimeters on this side. So it's remarkably wet, 4 times the amount on the westerly side. So that Vosges offers priceless protection against wet weather, windy weather as well, which means, of course, vines can flourish on the foothills of the Alsace on the eastern side. They will flourish because they'll be able to ripen very well. They will ripen nicely without much dilution as well. And the wind is not too significant here because of the protection. So problems around flowering are often kept to a minimum. So that's quite an important thing to really mention immediately, that protection. The other thing, which we'll recap in a second as well, is that the area of Alsace is very geologically active. There's a lot of soils. There's actually 13 major soil type here. So it's a real mosaic of soils. So that's quite fascinating. You'll find that this landscape was not carved by the Rhine River. And let me just identify the Rhine River for you here. So let's get that up a bit thicker. So here you go. Here you see the Rhine on this side, which forms the natural border with Germany, of course. The Rhine happened to find its way through here, and that's all due to plate activity, where we have the upthrust of the Vosges Mountains, the upthrust of the Schwarzwald, the Black Forest on the German side, and then a collapse in the middle side. So the whole thing rose like a souffle and then collapsed like a souffle in the middle as well. And then eroded over the oceanic times of this area with heavy sedimentary deposits. And then the river found its way through the middle of that area. So here you have igneous base rocks. So that's volcanic rocks, things like granite. And then you, of course, have sedimentary based. And there's lots of fault lines here. So they're very well exposed. So you'll find then huge diversity, village to village, vineyard to vineyard, due to this very distinctive plate activity showing different soils. So it's quite crazy. Let me also write up in the top the climate again, so you are quite clear about that. So we're saying cool, and I'm going to put to moderate because it's not so much, but in the south it's a little bit more like that, continental climate in this zone. Okay, so that's the kind of look and the layout of the land. That's giving you a bit of geology, a bit of topography as well. Most of the vineyards are not too high in altitude, roughly around 100 meters to 400 meters. The reason being is that it's already a cold climate, so you don't need too higher altitude in this zone. So let's go through the key aspects then of the vineyard layout. So this is the grape growing in the landscape. So first things first, talking a little bit about where the best sites are and then where the more kind of lesser sites. So our best vineyards are found on the slopes, of course, which are in the foothills of the Alsace with southeast and east aspects. And that's to gain the lovely bright sunshine, because there is quite a lot of cloud cover on the Vosges Mountains. So that's heading towards the west and in fact some southwest aspects. So you will often find that there isn't a great amount of sunlight that way. It tends to be southeast and east, and some south, of course, you'll find in this area. The vines are trained low, and that's the benefit from the radiated heat. So this is, of course, because it is a cold climate, and that radiated heat will be intensified with the Vosges Mountains. That is the soil of the Vosges Mountains, or the rocks, which is this volcanic schistous rock. So you'll find granitic-based style rocks, which are darker in color, which absorb heat and then radiate that off, which is quite important. There's a lot of weathered rocks as well, which are gravels and limestones and so on. And that is the same. So that will also absorb heat quite well. Hand harvesting will be done as a norm in this area because, of course, it is on slopes. Many of these are very steep and have to be terraced. So it's quite difficult for any kind of mechanized hand harvesting. So mechanized harvesting rather. So hand harvesting is the norm in this area. The lesser vineyards are on the plains. Now, as you go down the foothills and you head towards the towns, which tend to nestle right at the bottom of the foothills, beyond the town are the plains as you head towards the River Rhine. Colmar, for instance, sits very much in the middle of the plain, the main city, or the main sort of cultural city of Alsace. The main city is Strasbourg in the north. So the vineyards here are on flat land. There are sporadic bunches of vineyards down here intermingled with agriculture, such as barley and corn crops. So what you'll find is that here there is much more water supply, as of course it's a valley floor or a plain. And you'll find there's bigger yields in this area. And there also is a bigger spring frost potential here due to the fact that it is on a flatter plain area. Slopes always experience less frost, for instance. The vines will have to be trained quite high to minimize the risk of frosts, but also to create quite a nice big canopy to benefit from ripening as well. But generally saying, the simpler wines and often the non-noble varieties, such as Pinot Blanc and Silvaner, are often found on these plain-laden areas of Alsace. I've already mentioned this. I couldn't refrain from doing it because it is a remarkable area for a geologist like me to discover. So geologically, very, very diverse. And this creates a big breadth and plethora of styles. So you get real diversity here. There's nothing more wonderful than trying Riesling on all of these different soil types, Riesling is superbly expressive of its site. So trying it on granitic soils, on schistous soils versus limestone and sandstone and clays, and alluvium and colluvium. And there's lots of different diversities there, which tinker around with the acidities and the ripeness. They tinker around with the alcohol levels. They tinker around with the body and the weight. It's really fascinating to try the differences. So although there aren't a massive amount of grape varieties in this region, the diversity within each grape variety is absolutely fascinating in this area. And because of that lack of rainfall, I mentioned up to about 500 millimeters per year, often lower than that, this area therefore does not need to spray as much as other zones which will be found in the west of France. So there is a low amount of copper, sulfate and sulfur spraying in this area. So therefore a much more bigger opportunity and possibility for organic and biodynamic viticulture. In fact, there are now 60 producers registered as biodynamic in this area, which is the greatest. And organic, of course, much more than that. So big percentages here of real sort of understanding nature, working with the ecology and the ecosystem, healthy soils. It's a real fascinating landscape for that process as well. It was the Meyer family with the first biodynamics in the late 70s, and then Pierre Frick in 1980, which started the kind of trend of biodynamics in this area. And then we, of course, have these very long, protracted harvests due to the protection by the Vosges against the westerly wind. You will find, due to the soils as well and the differing ripening levels of each variety, harvests here can start in September and can finish in November. And of course, that brings into play the late harvest styles, which we will talk about later, but we'll identify again here for you. So we have things like well, first of all, let's talk about some very early harvests, and that is things like Crémant, so Crémant d'Alsace. Grapes for this may be picked in late August or early September. We then have sort of standard harvests that would go through September into October. Then we have late harvests, vendange tardive. Whoops, vendange tardive. I am spelling very poorly today. Tardive, there we go. So Crémant d'Alsace picked early, vendange tardive picked quite late, and then we have selection de Grain Noble, which is a selection of grapes noble. That's your nobly rotted styles, which are even later in the year. So these latter two will go into October and into November for instance. So therefore, you are talking about a very long, extensive harvest. You'll need skilled teams and skilled labor that need to stick around for a number of months as well to really go through the whole harvest, which is very, very important, of course. So long, protracted harvests in this area. Let's have a quick look then at the landscape, because I've mentioned a little bit about this area. We are actually going to look at some Grand Cru sites, and the Grand Cru sites will give you an idea of really the kind of locality, the slope, the Vosges mountains, but you'll also be able to see down towards the valley and the foothills where you'll find the towns as well. So we're going to look at a number of Grand Crus as short videos here. So first of all, we are going to look at the Sommerberg Grand Cru, which is just north of Riberville, near Niedermorschwehr, which is in this picture, as you can see immediately. This is currently how this is showing on the screen. It is looking kind of northwest. So that Sommerberg site is actually facing mainly south, which is quite amazing. So this is only about 35 seconds. Here we go, focusing on Sommerberg, near Colmar, near Riberville, just past that, and Niedermorschwehr. And you'll see the Vosges off in the distance, but then you'll see these wonderful steep slopes of the Grand Cru of Sommerberg. Vineyards, grapes must be harvested from this site, following the principles of Sommerberg, which will be yield control, etc., but will produce very powerful wines, such as Rieslings, for instance. Albert Boxler makes some wonderful wines in this area as well. What else should we show you here? Let's show you Spiegel. No, yes, let's show you Spiegel as well. So let me just close that down and pop this one up. Here we go. So I wanted to show you this because this actually was a part of the holding picture that we saw at the start of the presentation. You actually saw the town of Guebwiller in the distance there on the left. And then we actually looked at this area, which was the Kitteley Grand Cru. The camera was just moved over a little bit south. But now we're looking at a number of Grand Crus. There's actually 4 Grand Crus here, including Kitteley, Kessler, Spiegel, and also Searing. But we're looking at the one that actually faces quite a lot east, which is the Spiegel Grand Cru, which we'll have a look at now. So let's go and have a look from afar, and then it will move in. So there's Spiegel Grand Cru identified already. There's Guebwiller again. So right in the foreground will be Kitteley. Just to the right will be Searing and Kessler. But we're moving around this little crop. It's another area very much protected from anything from the West Spiegel, very dry Grand Cru. But you'll see it's quite wonderfully situated there. Facing kind of east, directly east, right near Bergholz, which is the town at its foothills here. Not as steep as, say, the Sommerberg that we had, but still a rather good crop with a forest behind it, another protective natural layer behind it. But a very good Grand Cru at producing quality wines again, no doubt. Okay, so just a little couple of looks there at Grand Crus. Let's go through what they mean then, what that means in terms of production. Here, you've got the 2 types of wine. So we have AOC Alsace, and then we have AOC Alsace Grand Cru. So these are the 2 major styles. And Alsace was quite late to the AOC system in the 1960s. And that's a lot of history behind it. An area like this, which is a frontier region, economically, politically, and socially have been very, very badly hit, and it was very poor due to all of this strife in Europe during the end of the 19th century and pretty much the first half of the 20th century. So Alsace joined the group a little bit late with AOC Alsace, which we've got on the left-hand picture. I'll give you the same producer here. We have Domaine Weinbach. This is their Cuvée Laurence. You can have the names of special cuvées on there if you wish. A Gewurztraminer, but clearly identified as an Appellation Alsace Contrôlée. Okay, this is generic. It could come from a number of areas, could be blended from some Grand Cru sites, but its lowest denomination will be just generic Alsace vineyards. Okay, and about 75% of Alsace, maybe even 80% of Alsace, is bottled as generic Alsace style wine. And then we have the 51 Grand Crus. This originally was just one Grand Cru, but then they separated it out eventually to the 51 sites, realizing that they are all geologically and stylistically very different. Here is the Riesling Schlossberg, which is quite a famous one, not far from the Kaisersberg area. This is Grand Cru, as it states here quite clearly for you. Then says Appellation Alsace Grand Cru Contrôlé below it as well. It says the name of the Grand Cru, which is Schlossberg. It says your grape variety Riesling here by the same producer. Wines like this as Grand Cru will be lower yields, will be from sites which will gain more ripeness and more warmth from the soil. They have been producing high-end premium wine for a long time. They've been ring-fenced and identified as the highest quality, and will be inherent of their site. So their site, their soils will certainly give different characteristics in the wines. These will be the most complex expressions of Alsace Grand Cru. So you will get of Alsace wines, you'll get fuller bodied Rieslings, for instance, and across the board, the wines will generally be more complex, more long-lived. Now, there is a bit of an argument that some of the Grand Crus that have been created are rather large. So you'll see the size of them can be 20, 30, 40, 50 hectares big, and then you've got 50 of them. But still, the production that comes from Grand Cru actually only accounts for 5% of the total of Alsace, which is very small. So the argument, I think, is very thin. You do get some simpler Grand Crus, but they're still fantastic value for money. They will still not be too expensive in comparison to other Grand Cru areas of France. There are two terminologies you also might find on the label as well. These are actually not separate AOCs. These are names of different styles within the Alsace AOC. So you may get here something which is called vendange tardive, which means late harvest, from grapes that are picked later through the art of passerellage. And I'll write this down at the bottom for you. Okay, passerellage. Sorry, the spelling might be a little bit off. I think that's correct. So overripe berries that are left on the vine longer. This has to be carefully monitored because the acidities could drop, but with vendange tardive, with things like Riesling, that's often quite decent and easy to do due to Riesling's ability to maintain high acids through a later harvest. Then we have noble rotted styles. Okay, so selection of grapes noble, and this is noble rot, which you know, of course, as Botrytis. Okay, this is not the most common. Actually, either of these are that common. Selection de Grain Noble, noble rot, Botrytis needs a lot of humidity. Alsace does lack inherently this characteristic of humidity due to the protection of the Vosges mountains. But there is some humidity in autumn, specifically around the streams and small rivers that run their course into the Rhine River. So it is around these zones you may get more heightened marks of Botrytis. And there are some producers that will produce these nobly rotted styles, which will be picked very late, be very complex and more textural, and of course the sweetest wines of the region. Okay, so the wine production, now we need to understand that the area is what we call aromatic wines, not all of them, but as you go from here into places like Germany and into Austria, there is a collection of aromatic wines here, which all follow a very similar style of production. So first of all, 80% of the wines are single varietal. So that means that only one grape is found on the label. And if that is the case, which is often the case, it will be 100% of that grape variety. Okay, so the two labels on the previous slide said Riesling must be 100% Riesling and Gewurztraminer must be 100% Gewurztraminer. That is very much the German influence in this area, and there are many other German influences, including cuisine and gastronomy, architecture, and of course the bottle shapes of this area, which are flutes, and also names of towns, many burgs and virs and so on. There are some blends. So of course, there's 20% of blends. You have two types of blends in production. We have the Edelzwicker, which is actually listed just here, and then Gentil. Edelzwicker tends to be a blend of anything permitted in Alsace and tends to be some of the lightest wines of the area. Gentil must be made from mostly noble grape varieties and will be often a much more higher quality blend. But these are two blended names. Another very German influence there with Edelzwicker. Now, aromatic wines will go through a reductive winemaking production. So reductive means an anaerobic environment, so that is without oxygen. And classically here, they would use oak from the Vosges forest, which covers the Vosges mountains. That oak would be very old as it gets used and reused again. They keep reconditioning these oak casks, and on the inside of the casks, very thick tartrate deposits. So the tartrate crystals, which precipitate out as sediment, clump together on the inside of the cask, forming a natural tartaric deposit, and that actually acts as a buffer against oxidation. So although oak is used, oak flavor, oak aroma, and oxidation is very, very much minimalized. So it becomes a reductive winemaking practice. But newer productions, cooperatives, and larger factory-like outputs will use stainless steel today, of course, expensive, but used continually, and then offering very good temperature control to protect the aromatics. Okay, malolactic, which is said to also diminish aromatics but add texture, is mostly avoided. There are some producers that will use a little bit. Ostertag is one of them, but you will find that it is very rare. So it tends to be avoided to protect the aromatic. And of course, dry to sweet wines are made through the aromatic profile. Now, the dry wines, which is actually quite classic. Most wines here have been made in a dry style, which is in counterpoint to its German neighbor. But there have certainly been, with understanding viticulture and vinification and warmer conditions, there has been a propensity to move towards a few more sweeter styles or some noticeable sugar in a wine. And that is why something like Riesling, for instance, the standard Riesling AOC actually has a law today, which means it has to be below 9 grams per litre residual sugar, which makes it as a maximum off dry. So there's been movements towards to protect the styles of these dry classic wines. However, the Riesling as a Grand Cru can be a variety of sweetness levels. So it does really depend on your producer, for instance. Now, the key grape varieties here, of course, we have Riesling, accounting for about 25% of the total production of Alsace. The best wines here would be dry, of course, but some Grand Crus are certainly off-dry or even medium dry. Medium to full-bodied with some lovely weight behind them due to the low-yielding steep slope vines of the Grand Crus. Medium alcohol, normally sitting at about 12.5–13%. And then this wonderful classic high Riesling acidity. Riesling, remember, maintains its acidity quite late onto the season, which makes it a very useful grape variety in cooler areas. Plus, it also tends to bud late. So Riesling, therefore, does not suffer that much with spring frost. So in these cool zones where you normally find it, it is very, very useful as it's consistent as well as very classic and aromatic. Your characteristics that you get here, of course, you have things like lemon, things like apple, things like lime, maybe even peach. With sugar, they can get a bit more tropical, but it's very fruity. There are light floral notes. You will note actually often the floral characteristic, which is quite prominent in German Rieslings, tends to be a little bit more restrained in Alsatian Rieslings, but you can get things like chamomile, a light honeysuckle, jasmine, and elderflower notes still in these wines. And as they age, honey, of course, that petrol note, certainly with lots of years underneath their belt, as well as things like pistachio, pine nut character as well with German Rieslings. Sorry, with the Alsatian Rieslings. With about 20% of production is the grape Gewurztraminer, which is classically made here. It's kind of now its spiritual home, though it comes from sort of Germany, Austro-Hungary sort of zone. It is golden in color due to its pigmentation of its skins. It has like a golden pinkish color to it. So any kind of press contact, which you will get, will give this little bit of color. It is full-bodied. Gewurztraminer is full with a very sort of glycerol, rich, oily texture and acidities that tend to be low. We put low to medium here because on limestone soils in Alsace, they can be a little bit brighter, but often quite high alcohol and easily up to 14% alcohol by volume. Now, because of the sugar and the rich effect, you'll find things like peach, nectarine, lychee down at the bottom there, honeyed characters, sometimes candied fruits, Turkish delight, floral rosy characters, ginger and spice with Gewurztraminer. They're very exotic style wines, as you are well aware. Pinot Gris here accounts for about 10-ish%, just over, of Alsace's total production. The big thing about Pinot Gris is it's very different to Pinot Grigio from Alsace. It is genetically the same thing, as you know, but here, due to its longer growing season, better geology for Pinot Gris, slopes, steep aspect, it tends to make much more richer wines here. So full-bodied, quite high in alcohol with medium acidities. So less than Riesling, but more than Gewurztraminer, and a good rich texture. And expect things like sweet pear, peaches, things like honeyed notes, little bits of floral character, but nowhere near as much as Gewurz. And often a little bit of spice will be found in Pinot Gris as well. Muscat is your fourth grape out of the major ones they wish you to know. Now, it's important just to bear in mind that Muscat is a minor grape in production because it is quite a difficult grape to grow here. Muscat is only about 2 or 3% of the total production. And there are two types of Muscat. There is the Muscat Blanc à Petit Grain and then Muscat Autumnal. Now, Autumnal is a different type of Muscat, which has been kind of historically crossed in a vineyard, which is very, very light, much more delicate, much more neutral, whereas Muscat Blanc à Petit Grain is much more aromatic and more desired. However, Blanc à Petit Grain struggles with flowering and does shed its blossom quite easy. So a lot of producers who want to make a bit of money and want a cash crop have opted to use Muscat Autumnal. On the label, though, it will just say Muscat. They won't tell you the type of Muscat. So it's an interesting point. It's certainly something you must ask when you visit a producer. If you're trying their Muscat, you must ask what the percentages of Muscat are in, how much Autumnal, how much Blanc à Petit Grain, and you'll get an idea about the quality behind it. The types of characters here is that Muscat is very grapey, can be a little bit peachy, can be very floral and perfumed, honeysuckle here, jasmine notes. You know, it's basically quite exotic, near Gewurztraminer, but not as lychee or Turkish delight. It's a little bit more fresher in its characteristic, I would say. So a very minor grape, but still one of the 4 nobles. So the last 4 slides have been the noble grape varieties: Riesling, Pinot Gris, Gewurztraminer, and Muscat. Now, the 5th grape is Pinot Blanc, which tends to make simpler wines. A lot of it is in Crémant d'Alsace, but please refer to your texts for that. It's very rare that they'll ask you anything about Pinot Blanc. It's going to be about the noble grape varieties more than anything. So let's talk about a written question so you can get an idea about what may be asked. Now, as ever, please remember that if it's going to be a question on Alsace or a question on anywhere, it won't just stick to that chapter in your book. You are required to make connections. And remember, there's a whole load of chapters at the start about grape growing and key grape varieties. And Riesling has its own kind of section. So it's about understanding what Riesling is like as a grape and then applying it to Alsace. So here, it doesn't say anywhere in your text in the Alsace section that Riesling thrives in cool climates, and it wouldn't give you those 2 reasons. That's found in the early stages of your textbook. So let's go through those. Name 2 reasons why it can grow in colder conditions. It is a grape that is very tolerant of the cold, continental winters, so it doesn't suffer, and young vines won't suffer nearly as much as other varieties. And it buds late as well. We mentioned that earlier, which means that in cold areas where frosts are very prevalent, it survives and you get a consistent crop. It's very desired. Riesling can produce well-balanced wines over a range of differing sugar levels. State 2 characteristics that make this possible. So that is looking about how it can be left on the vine longer to accumulate sugar without losing its natural high acidities. It's a good ripener, so the acidities are kept, but it can ripen well in those late stages, mid to late ripening, so it can experience a longer growing season, especially in gentle, cooler growing seasons like Alsace, thus producing a range of different potential sweetness levels and therefore alcohol levels as well. Our Riesling is an aromatic variety. State 4 methods in the winery that can be used to enhance the aromatic profile. Okay, so this is about protecting it really against oxidation. So how do we do that? So first of all, this could be applied to any grape variety, but the use of sulfur dioxide. This will be used and carefully monitored as it is a preservative to ensure that the wine is kept fresh. So that is classic across all winemaking and white winemaking specifically. Method 2, the grapes will be gently pressed immediately in the winery with little or no skin contact. With skin contact, you can enhance flavor, but you'll enhance tannin and possibly color. This can impact the aromatic profile. You'll gain texture and weight, but it's the aromatics that we want to protect here. The juice before fermentation will be fully clarified off its sediment, and that kind of links into the one before it, the sediment and skin contact, and kept very clean as well, so no spoilage. And the fourth one, inert vessels, stainless steel or epoxy resin-lined cement vats will be used to ensure reductive winemaking through anaerobic conditions and easy temperature control. You could mention also there that old oak, but with tartrate deposits, could be used if it's specifically an Alsatian question, as we mentioned earlier in the presentation. So that is the end of the Alsatian section, going through some key geography, looking at the topography via the video, and talking about the major grape varieties and styles, with a bit of labeling thrown in as well. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please write any comments or questions below the video. We have many more of these videos online, but also available on the Jimmy Smith online portal, which is available through West London Wine School. So we're here to help you. We want you to get through your studies of WSET Level 3. Please do get in touch with me at Wine with Jimmy, at West London Wine, South London Wine are the two schools that I own. West London Wine is the award-winning WSET Educator of the Year 2018. Stretton Winehouse is the bar that I own in South London. So if you are in London, please come and look us up for a glass, a class, or a bottle. And use the hashtag WLWSVirtual if you can. Thank you very much. See you soon.